Hi, Troy. Thank you so much for joining me on Insomniac's chat. It's such a pleasure to have you here after having kind of worked with you over the course of 8 weeks, and also happy that you're going to be sharing your recovery story with us today. Welcome. And maybe you'd like to introduce yourself and maybe also just share a bit of your story.
Yes, ma'am. Let me just start off by saying it's been a pleasure, Miss Fiona, working with you. And this is totally my privilege to be here, to be
Mm,
able to, let the world know what a great sleep coach you are
that's so
and
nice.
how you really helped put me on the fast track to recovery. So, if I may start just from the beginning,
Yeah, please do.
it, it was it was around early March, maybe even late February, where I started noticing that my sleep patterns were getting out of whack. Just recently retired
Hmm.
from 31 years working at Costco in the meat department. So the world was changing for me, number one, with that. And fast forward to early March, my wife's my father-in-law, had passed away, and lots of emotions, lots of uncertainty. You know, my wife and I and my girls, my baby girls, we moved to Oregon 10 years ago from Hawaii. So to be all the way separated in by this big blue ocean and to not have that convenience of it, just being able to go back and forth to like see family and stuff like that.
Hmm.
That's also a big burden that we had to put on ourselves when we made the move, but it was a necessity. Anyway,
Hmm.
sorry to be dragging it out.
No, no,
So
go ahead.
when my wife and my girls went up there. They were fortunate enough that they got to see him just before he passed away. I had to stay back for other obligations and stuff like that that we weren't uh, able to take care of before.
Hmm.
So I stayed back and I was by myself in this house, besides my cats.
Hmm.
And I think in some ways it was kind of a blessing because that's when my insomnia just went full blown.
Hmm.
And I think it was some ways a blessing because I really didn't want my girls and my wife to see me in such a emotionally vulnerable state,
Hmm.
especially with the fact that my wife and my girls are dealing with the loss of their dad and their grandfather. But there was a big feeling of dread that
Hmm.
came over me just because I'm going nuts.
Yeah.
I'm losing it mentally and emotionally, and I'm trying to process everything that's going on.
Hmm.
So luckily, somehow, and I'm a man of faith,
Hmm.
not trying to push that on anybody else, but I'm a man of faith. And somehow, some way, I was scrolling through the wonderful world of YouTube, and I came across this young lady who was very, very wise beyond her years, and her name was Fiona.
You're
And
too kind.
and the words that were coming out of her mouth, your mouth, were just so impactful, and it was such a wonderful reassurance because most of the research I was doing to get myself on recovery from insomnia and my whole anxiety that I was going
Hmm.
through at that time. Everything is just so matter of fact and just so like you got to do this. If you don't do this, your health is at risk. That's
Hmm.
all I'm hearing from these
Hmm.
people. They may not say it in those words,
Hmm.
but it's when you're full blown with anxiety and insomnia,
Mhm.
those words are like a shot,
Yeah.
like they're just like a shot from a gun because it's just like, well, there's no hope, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
It took me to come across you to finally realize that, hey, everything's okay. All the professionals that are saying that your life is at stake unless you get the 8 hours of sleep, unless you do this and unless you do that. And granted, those are true words, but
Hmm.
when you're suffering with
Hmm.
insomnia, it just drops you into this pit of despair, and you feel like you have no way to come out, and the world
Hmm.
becomes so much more scarier.
Hmm.
What was interesting and also somewhat relatable in the sense when I found you wasn't just the words, but how those videos that you bravely posted of yourself when you were suffering, those
Hmm.
tears in your eyes were so just you want to like rescue you at that moment, and me being a father of all girls, it's like I wanted to comfort you at that point, but it's like, oh, wait a minute, but that's kind of the same stuff that I'm feeling right now. Like I just the fear in my soul.
You felt
Totally,
identified in a way.
totally,
Yeah.
totally with those tears in your eyes, and just like how you're saying, like your world was turned upside down.
Hmm.
And that was what really kind of drew me to you because it's like, okay, if this young lady is now with this bright smile telling me, hey, it's okay, I can teach you the way. And then you being at that moment and referring back to the parts where you're crying and you're just like, desperate. I
Hmm.
was like, I need to follow her. I need to see what she has to say. And it was the best thing I could have done for my recovery because everything you said made sense, and it also reassured me that
Hmm.
that I'm not doomed, that this is
Hmm.
something that I can get through. And
100%.
I was so elated that, you know without sounding too corny, that the Lord blessed me to be able to find you,
Mm,
especially at that time when I was by myself, dealing
definitely.
with it. And
Definitely.
that was basically the start of my journey and my recovery
Yeah.
from insomnia.
Well, I'm really glad that we did cross paths because, I think sometimes like, and this is where I also love that we are recording this video for anybody watching because a lot of times you see all of these like recovery videos and they can be motivating in a way, but then you have like the stories of like where people have been struggling with insomnia for like years or like ages. And I think like a lot of times we wonder like, oh, is that actually going to be me? Like, am I going to be
Right,
stuck in this like insomnia for such a long time? And don't get me wrong, like regardless of how long insomnia lasts, it's a horrible experience because it's
right,
experienced on like the day-to-day basis and especially like your approach at night. And the fact that you did come across, I guess, my videos and kind of like my interpretation of how to recover from insomnia, I guess based also on my own journey is also testament that recovery is out there for everyone at every point throughout recovery because you know I'd say like maybe there's no comparison but you did kind of like find me early on in your journey and
yes,
it
mhm,
slowly started making sense to you very
right,
quickly. So I'm glad that yeah, we're kind of like sharing this because there may be other people out there who are probably like looking for similarities and how they can relate to people who have recovered, but maybe at times like they just don't feel identified because everybody else on these recovery videos has had insomnia for maybe such a long time.
right,
So I'd say like I'm so glad that you did find me when you did and that yeah, it resonated with you because in the end, there is a very clear explanation for why we're struggling with insomnia and the
Mhm.
patterns and how we kind of like behave around sleep and our attitudes around sleep, of course, are unique. But it really just takes that right coach and that right messaging for you to start seeing it yourself. Um,
Exactly.
which is actually where I wanted to ask you, like, what would you say was like that key learning for you in this process that helped you see, I guess, besides maybe relating to me and how like if I could recover, but what about the insomnia teachings maybe most resonated with you when it came to trusting your body's ability to sleep?
Well, the probably the biggest thing that, at least was able to kind of like take me down a few notches
Mm-hmm.
from being super hyper aroused and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
was just the fact that I'm not going to die
Mm-hmm.
um, if I'm not getting 8 hours of sleep. That it's, and I'm not trying to quote you, but I remember something along the lines where you're saying it's like scientifically not possible that,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to sleep and you're going to die from this.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, just few words that when myself was, full blown and, going through this, that I just needed somebody else to tell me that, because no matter how much I'm trying to say that to my head, that that protective side, that side that is
Mm-hmm.
saying that, I'm doomed and stuff like that, that voice is just too big at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, seeing yourself also having had suffered and then now coming through it, uh, you know, successful,
Mm-hmm.
uh, really kind of like, put me back on track. It kind
Mm-hmm.
of like, brought me back down, and it was like, hey, okay, just just do this.
Yeah.
Let's listen to what Miss Fiona has to say and trust in the process. And I think
Mm.
that that's something that throughout your program or even just your videos that I would like always go back to is, you have to trust. You have to build trust and stuff. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely hard once you're right in the midst of it. But
Definitely.
yeah, but that was one of the key things, was just being able to hear it, because that I'm gonna be okay, because everything
Mm-hmm.
else, like I said, all the professionals are like, oh yeah, no, your health um relies upon 8 hours of
On
sleep. And
sleep,
it's just
yeah. I think the
God,
dialogue around sleep specifically is just quite negative, and I'd say that in
mm,
us working together, all that you really needed was one, of course, like the support, but realistically, mainly like the education and how that's the thing is like the majority of information out there around sleep is just so escalating and so like inflammatory regarding what's going to
right.
happen when sleep doesn't happen or when it doesn't happen, and it leaves
Mhm.
us just very lost. And specifically I think a lot of the sleep advice for sleep in general, like if you were to Google how to fix your insomnia, like you're automatically met with, I don't know, drink a warm tea, like dim your lights at night, don't look at your screen, like all of this very conflicting evidence. And I remember we even talked about like the TV with you about whether or not you should or should not watch TV, like in an effort of befriending wakefulness. And it
Yeah.
always just comes down to this educational component of understanding, like, okay, there's a clear explanation as to why I'm feeling a specific way. And when I educate myself correctly, and that's the thing, like, I'm just so shocked that there isn't enough information out there over this
Mhm.
because so many millions of people struggle with insomnia.
Right, right.
So really just like honing down on like in the correct, with the correct evidence or the correct education can really allow us, right, to reclaim
Mhm.
that narrative. And we spoke about it as well, like when we spoke, but I'd say that at the beginning when we're struggling with insomnia, it's like this the narrative is dominated by sleep and by like
Mhm.
the lack thereof is gonna cause X, Y, and Z. And only
Right.
through like the experiencing of that thing that we fear so much can we actually get to the other side and start to maybe question, is this actually true? Because I feel fine
Yeah.
anyway,
Hmm.
right?
And it's
Well, yeah.
such a vulnerable state to be in when you're exhausted, when you have not had much sleep
Hmm.
or any sleep at all.
Hmm.
And these voices, or, these worries that are just like feeding you in your
Yeah.
head, they get louder and louder, and then you kind of develop the uh like a weakness because you're losing strength, so to speak, being so tired and so exhausted. The mental
Yeah,
capacity that you have to be able to kind of help balance yourself starts to kind of dip. Well, was in my case.
yeah,
And all the anxiety just got more and more pronounced, and the logic and stuff in me started to just kind of like disappear.
yeah,
And
definitely.
it just sucks that when you're in your own head being attacked by this invisible, non-existent enemy, basically, it, you're not strong, or you don't feel strong because you're so weak and vulnerable because you're tired,
Yeah,
and
as well,
you
definitely.
just want to go to sleep, and it's like you're fighting yourself, and like how you always say, you can't fight this, you can't
Mm,
force yourself to do this, and it just makes it
yeah,
that much more. It almost feels like, yeah, I'm doomed, I'll never be able to sleep again.
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely just a very powerful lesson that, it can transfer over to so many other areas of life, which is like a
Exactly.
whole conversation in itself.
I know. I know.
But I'd say to kind of like wrap things up, and I'd say to anybody out there who's listening, what would you say to someone who's like stuck in the midst of like being so afraid of the night and just like
Right.
only getting up a couple hours, if that, and this narrative around insomnia really dominating where they are? What would you say to them? Like, what has been your biggest lesson you'd like to pass on?
What I would like to say, and this may not be the cure all because
Hmm.
I'm not obviously as filled with wisdom like how you are, but what worked for me, what really worked for me, and this is going to be tough because when you're going through it, you want you want the fast one. You want to be cured overnight. But one of the big things that I think is super important that people who are suffering or going through this is you gotta have patience. Gotta
Hmm.
have patience. It's not an overnight cure. It's a process. You gotta
Yeah.
build yourself back up. And when there's a lot of comments that I would see, whether on your YouTubes or other people back in the day,
Hmm.
they have one bad night and they're done. Like
Yeah.
they feel like they're failures, and it's like you just kind of gotta like stop
Yeah.
for a moment, relax, and just keep working through it.
Hmm.
And to me, I and I don't know if this is the right things to say, but just in my personal experience, I built this condition up in my head.
Hmm.
I I made this, and I had to kind of like develop the patience and bring my mentality back that, well, I made it. I can beat it, you know.
Hmm.
I can reprogram this part because this is not real.
Hmm.
This scary ghost or this scary entity that I think I'm never going to sleep and I'm going to die
Hmm.
from not sleeping. I created that. Nobody told me that except from inside my head. So I can obviously counter that with the logic part of my brain and reprogram it.
Yeah.
And anyway, yeah. So long-winded thing is, yeah, just be patient with yourself. You can get through this, but you
Hmm.
need to be kind to yourself and not give up
Hmm.
whenever there's a setback.
Yeah. Oh my God, so powerful. That's so true. Like I feel like that's not often like shared enough because it is we just in that moment we're just like so uncomfortable and we just so badly want to get better that it's so hard to see like the light in the under at the end of the tunnel, and it's so hard to
Right,
like devalidate like all of the progress we have made. It almost seems like it's been swept away, but
right.
like you said, it can't be undone. Like it is this process, and just like you have learned this association that this is that wakefulness is a fear, we need to unlearn that, and that will also take time.
Hmm.
And that's like you couldn't have said it better. I really love that that was a realization that you also had throughout your journey, because I'd say that there were probably nights where you had bad nights, but
Oh
you
yeah, oh
still
yeah.
you were able to actually remind yourself and offer yourself that sense of reassurance and also calm and compassion kind of like
Mhm.
approach that really also aided and supported you in recovery, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. One of the big things also that I started to incorporate was just really looking at the positive things that happened rather than focusing on all the negative. Like if I did fall asleep for like an hour and a half, to
Mm-hmm.
me, I was like just so elated because I was like, look, see, I'm proving to myself you can fall asleep again.
Yeah.
Regardless of the amount of time, it's like you can do this. You just got to keep working at it and
Mm-hmm.
let it happen naturally, of course. You can't force it, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing that I was uh, really trying to be big on is like to always look at the positive things that were happening, like any kind of little moral victory. Like even if I did doze off for like five 5 minutes just while watching something, and I'd wake up and be like, "Oh, okay, well, I see, I can go back to
Yeah.
sleep." So
Yeah,
stuff like that for me.
definitely. Yeah, I think that's really, really powerful, and I really appreciate you sharing your story and being on here. Um, I'd say like we can slowly wrap it up. It was also
Yes.
a very much a pleasure to work with you. I find it, yeah, I also thank you for like saying that you feel relatable to my experience, and in a way, this is also part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing because I didn't have the same experience as you did when I was struggling with insomnia. I didn't find like that resonating message until like a year into my recovery or like a year into struggling. So it was a
Yeah.
really long-winded kind of experience where I felt like I didn't sleep for a year.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm just really glad that we did cross paths and it was also such a pleasure to work with you and we had such great chats. So I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you, Miss Fiona, and I hope the world will be able to soon recognize your greatness and your
Mm.
wisdom, and give you all the accolades that you deserve. So deserve.
Thank you.
No, thank you.